Ladies and gentlemen, we're in the final push to get the MD running. I went to Napa this morning, got everything I needed to get her running, even got gas and diesel. And yes, it's a beautiful day. We're supposed to have a few coming here, but when I get this close to finishing a project, it's on my mind all the time. And I just want to get it to the point to where we can start her up and run her. So I'm in for the duration now, except for feeding the animals and doing the chores on the farm. No special farm projects till this gets done. Yesterday I did some painting touch up on the tractor. I painted that gauge there that was bugging me. Touched up all the bolts that had been damaged. I put the coil on, so that's all set to go. I got the sediment bowl on, got the fuel line to the carburetor on. I took the old hydraulic hoses off and the old valve that was up here, took the fenders off, and pulled the switch box apart with all the old wiring. And the first thing I'm going to do this morning is rewire the tractor. I bought a new wiring harness from Brillman Company. They do an awesome job putting together factory correct wiring harnesses, new ammeter for the tractor. I've used a lot of Brillman wiring harnesses and never had a problem with them, and they always look super. They weave cloth all around them just like original. We've got cloth covered wires here. Everything comes color coded with the instructions so you know what goes to what, and this one is even made for a one-wire alternator instead of a regulator and generator. Now I'm not going to need this one right now. This is the one that goes from the switch to the headlamps, so we'll put that away. And number 10 is the light switch to rear lamp and this armored cable. We won't need that. We'll put that away. It's not leaving us with much. There's not a lot of wiring on these old diesels. So that brings us down to the main trunk that goes along the engine and some of the jumpers that go to the distributor, etc. The first thing I want to do before I start any wiring is set this alternator in place and see how it fits. This is a Delco 10SI one-wire alternator. You just need to hook up the battery wire to it and it'll charge the battery. It's got an internal regulator. This alternator is different from regular M. On a regular M, the generator sits way up here underneath the hood. And you have clearance issues. A 10SI will fit in there, but you got to get it just right. I've got a 10SI on the H that's fit up under the hood, and it's a tight fit, but it works. On this one, it's down underneath the hood, so I don't have to worry about any of that. So this pulley and the generator pulley on the water pump line up well, so I know I'm good with this top adjustment bracket. I'm going to have to make a custom bottom bracket to mount the bottom of the alternator in, but I know I've got it set right about where I need it. So this is the main harness going from the front to the back of the tractor. The one with the end with extra wire on it is the one that goes up front onto the engine. There will be some clips on top of here to hold it in place. I just haven't gotten around to painting them and installing them yet. So we just need to route this wiring harness through. We'll temporarily connect it to the hot post on the alternator. This fat white wire is the alternator post wire. Then this other end routes down through here. Fed. Back to where the switch box goes. Now, if you've been with me for quite a while, you know that there is a contact underneath this plate on the intake manifold which shuts off the ignition when it switches to diesel so that you're not sparking the plugs when it's in diesel mode. But this tractor originally had a magneto on it, and they're different for battery ignition. I'm just going to pull this cover off and see what we got and see if I can make it work. Yeah, see, here's the problem. When it's in diesel mode, this is grounded out. This plate here is touching this, and it grounds out the magneto to stop the spark. But I want just the opposite for battery ignition. I want it to make contact when it's in gas mode so that it's supplying power to the coil instead of being grounded out. Well, what I'm going to do is put this back together and leave it as is and not route the wiring through it, because I need a different kind of contact in here for battery ignition, and that's something I'll have to go looking for on the net, I guess. What I can do in the meantime is when I'm running it on diesel, I can just turn off the ignition switch, and that way it'll stop the spark to the plugs. Now we can go ahead and hook the coil up from my electronic ignition, and we got to cut these wires to length. Black goes to the negative post on the coil, which is over here. Heat shrink tubing connector. I just run the flame alongside these or way out from it and gradually heat them up till they shrink. There we go. Black wire to the negative coil post. And red wire to the positive post, and this one gets combined with the hot wire that's coming from the switch. Now then, I got to take this old wiring mess out. This is the switch box that goes up front on the operator's platform. All this old stuff needs to be stripped out of here. Now all this mess is back here is this is the light switch, and on the older Farmalls with a cutout relay charging system, it also kind of turned the regulator on and off to control whether the generator was putting out low or high charge. But this one is just a light switch, and then the ammeter, we're not going to bother with the light switch. I'm going to deal with the lights when I do the back end of the tractor. We're just going to replace this ammeter and wire it in. Whoops. Here's the new ammeter. Put her in here. This is the old push-pull ignition switch. It had a two-pole, well, not a two-pole, but a two-terminal switch on it, which is for battery ignition to make or break the circuit to the coil. A magneto would just have one tab on the back to ground out the magneto. So this switch is grounded. It completes the ground to shut off the magneto. I've got a new one of these on order because I don't like the action on this one. It feels kind of gummy. But we're going to put this old one back in to begin with. Clean off these terminals. And we can put this starting switch in. I like to do this wiring by doing it a circuit at a time. So this is the wire that energizes the coil. It goes to the coil post. And that goes straight to the ignition switch here, so that when I turn it on, the coil is energized. And then this other wire goes from the other post on the ignition switch up and will catch hot on the ammeter from there in the switch box. This is a starter switch. I bought a new one. It's not the greatest quality, but we'll see how she works. They don't make them like they used to. Originally, MDs had a foot-operated switch, which was a paddle over here that wound up pushing in the starter button here behind the post. My H is this way, except it's got a rod that goes through and you touch it with your foot. But MDs were a little different. Anyway, I'm not doing that. That was long gone before we got this tractor. I'm just gonna put it on like I would a regular M with the starter button up here. Now remember, I'm still working on the circuit that provides power to the coil. Just take it one circuit at a time. This post on the push button switch will always be hot because this one's going to be connected directly to the positive terminal of the battery. So I can grab power off of this. And eventually I'm going to hook a battery cable up to this as well after I get this small wiring done. So we'll just screw that on temporary. Feed this wire down underneath here. This could be a little goofy till I get the clips hooked up to it, but we'll just run the wires around here for now. Now this wire coming from the push button switch here, the starter switch, comes up into the box, and now I'm going to start hooking up the ammeter. So the wire from the battery goes to the negative post on the ammeter. I'm pretty sure. Sometimes I get these backwards and the ammeter goes the opposite way from it should have, but I believe it goes to the negative post. Now, since this is going to be sort of my hot post on the ammeter, because there's always battery power here, I'm also going to hook up the other side of my ignition switch to that. And they both go on here. So, in a nutshell, I've got battery power coming always directly from the battery to one post on this starter switch, which cranks the starter. From there, it comes in a wire to the negative post of the ammeter. So this wire is always hot with battery power. And from there, it goes down this wire to the switch here that turns the coil on and off. And from this switch, the wire goes up to the negative post of the coil and energizes the coil when the switch is on. It's as simple as that. Without a regulator, things get a lot easier. Now, this is the wire that comes from the alternator. I'm going to hook that to the other post of the ammeter. So when the alternator is charging, it'll show current flowing through the ammeter. And like I said, I may have this backwards, but it's pretty easy to reverse the poles after you see how the ammeter runs. I think this is the way it goes. So on the charging circuit, what I've got happening is power generated coming from the alternator here, crossing the ammeter, showing the charge on the ammeter, and then it comes to this post, which goes back through the starter switch and straight down to the battery to charge the battery. And that's all there is to this box right now. And when you add lighting, you've got some other business going on here, but it's pretty darn simple. And we can close that up. Now we can do the battery wiring. Here's a tired old battery box. Like most of them, it's got some holes rusted in it from the battery acid. I don't know if I'll try and patch it or buy a new one, but anyway, I'm going to use this one for now. Battery in. It was the closest size I could get. I was looking for the maximum cold crank amps. This is 785 at 32. Since it's a little tight with the battery on the tractor, I'm going to go ahead and hook these up before I put it on. I'm going to negative ground here. Originally this was a positive ground tractor. And these are 2-aught battery cables, which are probably quite a bit of overkill, but I like to use big battery cables to get as much amperage to the starter as I can. Put this in. Now this battery terminal goes to the always hot terminal on my starter push button switch. The same one that I ran the wire off to go to the ammeter. There. Now the other cable on the push button switch goes to the starter. That's the longer one that I've got here. I just need to figure out the best way to route this. We'll go inside here. And that cable comes down around and goes to the post on the starter. And of course the starter's already grounded to the frame, so it's only got one connection. I'm just thinking about the best way to route this. I'm going to have to wind up putting a clip in there. So we want to clean up these nuts on here and this post for a nice hot connection before we put it together. We got these nuts cleaned up good. I've seen these turn red hot from the current if they're not shiny and smooth. There's my cable. Now we've got the ground cable here on the other side. Of course, the ground just as important as the hot side in terms of completing the circuit. So I can anchor at lots of places here. You just want to pick a large size bolt that connects directly to the frame. I think I'm going to hook it to that one on the belt pulley cover if I can get it to bend around the way that I want it to. I don't want it in front of the brakes. I don't know. This is all just temporary, really. But before I hook it up, this all needs to be cleaned up nice and shiny real good. I know this isn't the proper way to use a tap, but it's the only way I can get in here. Just going to chase it out anyway. All right, we got bolt cleaned up, deck cleaned up, hole cleaned out, hopefully a good connection. I think I want to pull that around like that so it's more out of the way. All right, it's the first little moment of truth. Will the starter turn over? I'm just going to touch it. Ooh, that sounds good. Next we can put on the plug wires. The plug wires we just go in firing order. So here's number 1. This goes backwards. Almost fooled me. 1, 3, 4, 2. Normally they would go 1, 3, 4, 2, but this one goes backwards. 1, 3, 4, 2. So 1, 3, plugs are way up in there, and 2, and finally the coil wire. And that does it for the wiring. I mean, there's really not a lot to it, and even when I add the lighting, there's not a lot to that either. Much simpler than the later, like the 656 had a mess of wires in it when I rewired that. I disconnected the positive terminal on the battery because I'm really not comfortable leaving it connected until I get everything set up and the alternator set in place and she's ready to start. I want to do this before I forget about it. This injection pump actually has an oil sump in the bottom of it, and this is the level petcock. So you fill it with oil till it runs out of the petcock here, and this is the fill. Yep, started dripping out, so she's full. Next thing is to finish up this linkage to the injection pump here, which is a little bit of guesswork since I don't have the engine running to adjust low idle speed. But we'll just put it in here. I ain't getting close to that water trap today. I am done with that sucker. I hope it doesn't leak. Now I want to get this lever here so that it's kind of at the end of its travel. So it needs to come off. It's on a spline shaft, so you can adjust it. Just try it down there. I think we're still not far enough. I would say that's about right, at least to start with. These things are the way that International always managed wires running across the chassis. These little foldable clips, the wire goes in here and then you fold it over. The nice thing about them is if you don't have enough of them laying around, yes, you can order them, but also they're really easy to make. You just cut them out of sheet metal and bend them. Like so. Go ahead and put on the air cleaner assembly, starting with the intake pipe here. The intake pipe. And over on this side we got the air intake for the injection pump to hook up. I can put together the air cleaner and put it on, but unfortunately I need a piece of 2 1/4 inch radiator hose to hook it to the intake pipe, so I don't have that. I'm going to have to get it next time I'm out. Went ahead and filled this full oil up to the level. This is the last thing I wanted to get done today, and that's to make a bracket for this alternator. And Dad welded one up, and I drilled holes in it and got it to the right shape, and I'll show you how it's made. I was able to use this existing bracket. It lines up the pulleys great, and I've got lots of back and forth adjustment room on it. And it just bolts to the existing mount where the generator bottom mount was. So, came out all right. I want to get this painted tonight, get this bracket painted tonight so I can mount the alternator and go to town on the radiator tomorrow. It's been a long day. I got all the pieces painted for the alternator brackets. I got all the hardware painted for the radiator. So the next step tomorrow is to run out and get an alternator belt. Then I can set the water pump alternator, get that belts all tightened, put the radiator in. We're really making progress. Won't be long now. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you next time.